Welcome to Hochoka Podcast.
Hello, Mitakuyepi, and welcome to Hochoka here at the center of St. Joseph's Indian Schools campus. I'm Scott Wooster.
And I am Macaw Black Elk.
We're today's Hochoka hosts. This is our first ever remote participant podcast. We're glad you have joined us and joined our circle to hear Father Mike Carson, Assistant Director of Native American Affairs for the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. Today is the conversation on Indian boarding school truth and healing work in our country and the Roman Catholic Church. First, Macaw, thank you for being here once again. And can I ask you just to introduce yourself again and just talk a little bit about your role in boarding school and truth and healing work? And then I'll ask the same of you, Father Mike.
Yes, no problem. So my name is Macaw Black Elk. I am the Executive Director for Truth and Healing at Red Cloud Indian School in Pine Ridge, South Dakota. And I've been in that role for the past 2 years or so. My job there is to help that school, which is a former boarding school, go through its own process of sort of truth and reconciliation with that particular community. And in that work, I have been involved in not only our own community's process, but also in supporting the work of the American Indian Catholic Schools Network, which is part of the Office of Alliance for Catholic Education at the University of Notre Dame. And that's where I have worked with Father Mike Carson, who in his role supports the American Indian Catholic Schools Network.
Excellent. Thank you. And Father Mike, if you do the same, just explain your role with the truth and healing in boarding school history.
Yeah, thanks for welcoming me into your podcast. And it's a very important subject, especially not only for schools on reservations, but also across the country with the Catholic Native American population. I'm Father Michael Carson. I'm the Assistant Director for Native American Affairs at the USCCB, United States Catholic Conference of Bishops. First of all, I'm the staff person to the Subcommittee of Native American Affairs here at the USCCB. And we have 7 bishops on our subcommittee, and they meet twice a year. So with the help of Bishop Chad Zielinski, our chair, we set up the agenda, we do the meetings, we also do investigations, so work on the documentation for the subcommittee. Anything they need investigating, that's my role and that's my job, being the staff person to the subcommittee. Principally, that's my role. I also do a lot of coordinations of missions, churches, and schools, mostly on reservations, but those who cater to the Native American population. I help the bishops work with national organizations that work with Catholic Native Americans.
Okay, thank you, and it's good to have you here too. And I'm a little bit of the odd man out because you two work together from time to time. How does your work influence each other? How do you two work together?
Oh, Father Carson and I have been working together now for a couple of years, and always look forward to just doing collaborative work with the American Indian Catholic Schools Network and with the USCCB. We have collaborated on conferences that support work in Native communities, especially in Catholic schools, working in Native communities. And it's just always a great pleasure to work with Father Carson and his team.
Yeah, it's my pleasure also to work with Macaw and his knowledge, his expertise on this issue. He's my go-to person in terms of podcasts and conferences. He's done a great presentation, not only to national organizations, but also to the subcommittee itself. So it's my great pleasure to work with him and continue to work with him and the American Friends, or American Indian Schools Network.
So Father Carson, back in November of 2021, Bishop Wall from the Diocese of Gallup, who was on the subcommittee of Native American Affairs, and then Bishop Coakley from the Diocese of Oklahoma City, issued a letter to all bishops in the United States that concerned Indian boarding schools. And so listeners might be wondering about that process. Why did those 2 bishops issue that letter, and how did that work?
That's a very good question. The history behind that is, when I first arrived, we go through these 4-year planning processes and goals of the subcommittee. In order to do that, we had, with the help of the Black and Indian Mission Office, we gathered all the Catholic Native American leadership throughout the country for a week symposium in Arizona, just to talk to them about what their priorities are. And they made it very clear that Catholic Native American ministry cannot continue unless this issue of the boarding schools is addressed, not just at the local level. A lot of bishops have been working at the local level to address this issue, but at a national level at the UICCB. So the Bishops' Subcommittee understood that, and they put in their objectives for the next 4 years, doing all the various important ideas, and that got into the response to the Bishop Coakley letter. The letter first was concern from the bishops who were concerned about the report from Secretary Holland and the response to that report, but it also was a greater concern for the UICCB trying to help the bishops with this issue and the important part to go forward. Now, the story behind that, the USCCB can't mandate anything with any bishops, that we're there to help and suggest and to guide. So if a bishop has a concern, or if it appears that this concern is nationally, then the subcommittee deals with that from the Native American standpoint and works with that issue. So the requirements or the suggestions from the letter was just a suggestion to bishops, if they have a concern about this issue, to get involved in the 5 things, 5 items. I can talk about the 5 items that we want the USCCB as a suggestion for the bishops to do. First, we need the bishops to have tribal listening sessions. Many dioceses, archdioceses have already done that. And this is to invite the natives, Catholic and non-Catholic, to just be a part of a dialogue and conversation about their experience with native boarding schools, both good but especially bad, sins and evil that's committed by the Catholic Church, to work with that. And just to have the official Catholic Church listening to these sessions and develop some recommendations after these sessions. They're very good, they're very important. Makah's been part of some of those, and I've also been a part of those. They're incredibly healing and important for the diocese and archdiocese to do. Second, we're asking the bishops, archbishops, to have a better relationship with their tribes in their diocese and archdiocese. Some do have a great relationship with especially tribal governments, but we're looking for opportunities to increase that relationship so there's no misunderstandings and their concerns are addressed by the diocese and archdiocese and by the parish churches in the area. Third, we're asking also for the diocese and archdiocese and even religious orders to do some archival research. If there's any information about Catholic boarding schools, to find that information and work on ways to make that public. That might seem easy, but it's rather difficult. We're working with different national Catholic organizations of archivists on how to do that. Even a little information, even the names of people who have attended boarding schools, even that can promote healing. So we're asking for the diocese and archdiocese to do important archival research on finding any information about boarding schools and working hard to make that public. And then we're also asking for full cooperation, not only with the federal government with investigations of boarding schools, the cemeteries, of any information or any concerns that the federal government might have, but also with tribal governments. We're asking for full cooperation with bishops and archbishops for tribal governments who want to do their own investigation to make sure that we have a welcome mat ready for them and do as much work as we possibly can for them and to help their investigation. And then the last thing we're asking bishops and archbishops to do, we have this massive plan, this pastoral plan throughout the United States for Native ministry, for Native Americans, Alaska Natives, and Hawaiian Indigenous. It's a massive project that's going to take several years, especially because we need to do a lot of listening with Native communities and what they want the Catholic Church to do, what they want it to, especially the next 30 years of our pastoral plan. The last one was done in 1977, so it's well overdue. The church and the Native ministry certainly changed since 1977. So we're asking for cooperation for the pastoral plan, suggestions, and especially when we go through to revise it to make sure that bishops, archbishops are heard, but also their native communities, Catholic native communities, are heard for their pastoral plan. So those are the 5 things that are embedded in the Bishop Wall, Archbishop Coakley letter sent out to the bishops, just again to help with this concern about native boarding schools.
And since that letter came out, 2 other developments regarding the Indian boarding schools in the United States occurred that have also influenced the matter, and maybe you can speak to that, Makah.
Yeah, since the bishop's letter came out, and Father Carson is also very aware of this, we've had sort of 2 big developments that have impacted this issue. And namely, that is first, back in April 1st, 2022, Pope Francis issued a formal apology to a delegation of Canadian Indigenous peoples, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit folks, about the boarding school history, and gave more comments on that. And that has been an ongoing conversation in Canada. He's also followed up with a visit to Canada that will happen this July. And the other thing that has happened is the report that the Department of Interior was planning to study and create was finally released back in May 11th of this month in 2022. That's the report that first initiated Bishop Wall and Coakley's letter, was in anticipation of that report. So that report has finally been released and marks the first time that the U.S. government is sort of formally acknowledging its role in the running and funding of these boarding schools. And so those 2 things have had a major impact on this conversation in general. I'm curious, in light of the Department of Interior's report, what about those requests is still particularly relevant today?
Thank you, Makah and Scott. One of the requests that we talked about last time was the importance of information. Any information helps in the healing process. So the first report, the Holland report, we embrace it at the USCCB because of the information that it gathers, and the information that gets out there, that becomes very important in terms of healing. And also it responds to us in terms of our actions of working with the government and other agencies in terms of this issue, this very important issue of just getting the information out. And also the concerns, the problems, the pain that boarding schools has caused, Catholic native boarding schools have caused in the past, that also becomes very important to us and to the subcommittee. So it helps us in terms of our avenues of going forward.
And how does that affect, would you say, the bishop's efforts going forward as well?
It affects the bishop's efforts because it just spurs them on to do a lot more in terms of the Coakley, the Bishop Wall letter, and to work, of course, closely with the federal government and any other agencies that are concerned with this issue, and also highlights the importance of getting finding information and getting that information out.
Excellent. And so we talked a little bit about early April 2022 and the bishop's apology, Pope Francis's apology to the delegation, the First Nation, the Métis, and the Inuit delegates from Canada about the church's role in abuse that may have happened in the residential schools. Is it correct that apology was meant to include the United States as well?
From what I understand, the apology was directed toward Canada. However, just on a personal note, just watching the interaction with the First Peoples and Inuit and with all the people with the Pope, and just as they tell the stories and seeing the emotional response of Pope Francis, and then coming from that broadcast for the news conference afterwards, just seeing how much an apology like that helps First Peoples. It helps us with terms of organizing our own apology from the Bishops' Conference and also individual bishops, but also goes back to the understanding, as Catholic natives have said to me, is it's important to go beyond just an apology. the most important concern they have is that the apology just is the only thing that we do, that we issue an apology and say that's it. They're more interested, our Catholic Native leaders across the country, they're more interested in the steps that we can take, not only in the Bishop Wall, Archbishop Coakley letter, but also in terms of individual bishops and how they respond to the needs and concerns of the boarding school issue, especially the pain and suffering caused by abuse. They're interested in how the Catholic Church responds to that. They certainly want an apology, but they made it very clear that apology is the first step, but it's not the last step. They're more interested in all these actions and steps to go forward, especially to the steps of listening, as the Holy Father has done with the First Peoples of Canada.
It's a good place to start.
I fully agree, Father, and I think that's important that even Pope Francis himself says so in the apology, that good apology, good reconciliation comes with action. But in terms of just the importance of the apology, what do you think was really important about it, and what does it specifically call Catholics, both native and non-native Catholics, to do moving forward?
I think just the most important part of the apology was the response from the First Peoples of Canada and their understanding of the deep regret, the pain of Pope Francis, and the response to that, saying that the leader of our church, our Catholic Church, the Holy Father, has a great concern and is moved with compassion from his heart. I think that response from the First Peoples really was, to me, the most important part of that, because Pope Francis can issue an apology, but if there's no response, then the apology does not go anywhere. And same with our own efforts at the USCCB, that we can issue an apology, but if we don't feel for the suffering, the problems and difficulties that Catholic natives and other natives gone through, especially during the boarding school, then our apology and our actions don't mean very much. But that response that we are from the Catholic native people, and also natives in general, that we are doing and working hard to making sure that their pain, their suffering is entered in our hearts, and that spurs us on in our Catholic way to make sure that healing can take place.
Father Mike, it was nice to meet you and nice hearing from you today. And Maka, it was nice having you back in the studio to co-host today. And I'd like to thank you both and thank you to everyone who's watching for joining us here in the Ho-Chokeh at the center of St. Joseph's Indian School campus, where we talk about issues that are central to Native American education today. Until next time, stay centered.